All right, everyone, this module is going to focus on one of your main responsibilities when you find yourself in that supervisory or managerial role, and revolves around decision making. So we'll go ahead and get right into it. When we talk about decision making, what exactly are we talking about? What I want to add and supplement to this slide is, I may be stating the obvious here, but you are being compensated when you're in a supervisory, when you're in a managerial role, you're being compensated to make decisions. That is your main job with your organization when you find yourself in one of these types of roles, is you are the decision maker. So you're expected to know the policies and procedures. You're expected to make decisions and not be indecisive, and not just, pass stuff up the chain of command or pass stuff up the line. Your organization, those that you report to and those that report to you, are expecting you to be able to make decisions and not be indecisive. So when we talk about decision making, there are two categories of decisions that you're going to have to familiarize yourself with, and many of you starting out are going to find that most of your decisions are going to be non-program decisions. So we have decisions that we don't know the immediate answer to. We're going to have to do some investigating. We're going to have to look into it. The answer is not really that obvious. And many of you, like I said, are going to find yourself here when you're first starting out. This is a great opportunity to grow yourself as a professional, continually learn, continually educate yourself. You may just learn something new. But what I can advise here for this particular situation that you may find yourself in is to find yourself a mentor. Find yourself somebody that you can bounce ideas back and forth off of. And somebody that can just mentor you through the process. Now, when you start moving through your career, you're going to start finding more and more of your decisions are going to move into this program decision category. But starting out, you are going to find yourself more often than not in this non-program decision category. So the decision-making process, may look similar if you think back to when we talked about quality improvement. There's a lot of same elements in here, and truly, and particularly when we talk about defining the problem, it's not unlike finding the root cause. We have to get a good definition set to the problem. How do we know what we're addressing if we can't even define it? Unfortunately, and particularly in healthcare, we don't start here at this step, which is not only the initial step, but probably the most important step. We want to shoot from the hip and go straight into problem solving, or trying to solve the issue without really defining what the issue is first. So I want to encourage you to really think through your decisions, because unless you're clinical where you have direct patient care and a patient's life is at stake, very rarely are we going to have decisions that need to be knee-jerk responses, or we're going to have situations that arise that need knee-jerk responses. So just something to think through, or think about, just really start to think through your decisions and make sure that you can accurately define the problem before we move on to our next step, which is analyzing the problem. Now here, again, pretty self-explanatory, but here we're going to, really investigate. We get to put our investigator hats on and gather all the information. One thing I want to point out here, it's important to remain objective. You're out there to get the facts, you're out there to get the information, but at the same time you need to make sure that you're being empathetic. And that you're really listening. Think back to when we talked about empathetic listening, because you may be dealing with a very sensitive issue or a very sensitive problem. So you're going to have to find that balance between remaining objective while still being empathetic and listening. So when we come to alternatives, what I want to recommend here, really take the time to visualize each one of your alternatives. And again, often we're going to have decisions that don't need that knee-jerk response, which is what we tend to like to do. We really need to think through the decision-making process And take your time here, particularly around the alternatives, to make a good decision and to pick the appropriate alternative. So take time, really visualize what each alternative is, what it would look like if it were put into play, and think through the criteria that I have listed here, particularly around, ethical issues and how feasible and risky it is. So when we get to talking about the scientific decision-making model, here, think back a little to even PDCA. We want to make evidence-based decisions. And evidence-based decisions is kind of like evidence-based medicine. Our decisions are based on research and literature. I'll give a disclaimer, almost every issue that you're going to encounter out there has been experienced by somebody else in your facility or another facility entirely. So there's no need to, go and reinvent the wheel. There may be a good solution out there already that you may have to just tweak and adapt just a little to fit the purposes of your organization. And we do that through evidence-based decision making, where we look into what the literature is telling us. Now with experimentation, you don't want to experiment with a trial and error decision making. That can often lead you into some sticky situations. But I don't want you to read this as don't take risks. Risks are how we grow as individuals, as professionals, as an organization overall. So if everything is going along fine, you're not being risky enough. You're not growing as an organization, or you're not growing as a professional. But just be very cautious about doing trial and error decision making, and often it's not very appropriate for somebody in a managerial role to begin with. Now I'm going to end here on this slide. There are a couple more slides left in this lecture. I'll finish scrolling through them, and if you will please go through and review over them. If you have any questions, please let me know, guys.